And today we're doing a flow I created for the hips. So this is a yin yoga class that is going to work the 4 major myofascial compartments in the hips and the legs. And so, just very simply, you can think of if you think of your thigh, it's kind of an oval or a circle, right? But let's think of it like a box. So you have a front side, left and a right side, and then the back side. So each of those is a muscle group, basically, and we'll stretch each of those muscle groups. It's one way of kind of dividing up the muscles of the hip. There are other ways, and in other classes I look at it that way, but today we're just thinking front of the thigh, inside, outside, back of the thigh, okay? All right, so let's start actually with the inside of the thigh today. These are called the adductors. And what we'll do is take our feet, join them together, and then we just pull those heels in nice and close, and we let the knees drop, and we fold our torso forward, and we want to feel the stretch right in there on the inside of the thighs. And now it can be very common for people who've done other styles of yoga, who've not done much yin yoga, to think that the purpose of the pose is to go as deep as you can, and that you need to force or push yourself into the pose. So you might be like grabbing your feet and pulling yourself down, or trying to push your knees down, something like that. It's not a good idea in yin. There are exceptions, and I'll let you know when those come up. But generally in yin, you just want to, especially a forward fold like this, you want to relax into it as much as you can. Just let your upper body relax. That's the safest thing to do. As long as you feel the stretch here, and there aren't any alarming sensations in your body, like shooting pain, electrical, type pain, then just relax. Now feel free to use some support. So something under your forehead, like a yoga block, or forearms. You can see my forearms aren't quite resting on the ground yet, so I could put 2 blocks underneath them. Some people have big pillows or bolsters at home. You could lay on one of those. But I do want to mention, anytime I mention props, you don't want to lose the stretch here on the inside of the thighs. So you could even put a block under your knee, right, if you needed it, but you still want to feel the stretch in the inside of the thighs. Okay, so no matter what, you want to feel that stretch, and you want to feel safe. We'll be here for about 3 more minutes, and this is really the defining characteristic of yin practice, is generally you're holding postures in a relaxed way for an extended period of time. 5 minutes is usually the maximum, with rare exceptions, and I'll let you know if we ever do that. We never do that. I do that on my own, but we don't usually do that in class, okay? Okay, so use an inhalation to just gradually come up out of the pose. And then we'll do another posture before we rest for a moment or two. So this next posture is dragonfly. You notice I'm turning to face the long side of my mat. That is not required. Okay, so don't feel that you need to do that if you're comfortable just continuing to face in that direction. But we want to take the legs basically as wide as they'll go and as straight as they'll go. For some people, that's not going to be very wide, and it may not even be very straight. So you may end up in a position like this. You know what? It's fine as long as you still feel the stretch when you come forward. Okay? So the main thing is how we feel in a pose, not how it looks. So yoga is not a form of gymnastics. It's not a form of contortionism, although some people practice it that way. So I can't deny that there are some people who that's their main fascination with yoga, is trying to create interesting shapes with their bodies and achieve extreme levels of flexibility. But again, I think technically speaking, that's called contortionism if you're trying to contort your body. It's not really yoga. If you look at the history of yoga and you read the ancient scriptures from which the yoga tradition derives its heritage, there's no mention of contortionism until relatively recently. But there's a lot of mention of things like meditation and breath awareness and enlightenment. There are psychological concepts that show up in those texts. So anyone who's trying to claim that yoga is really about contorting your body, stretching your body, exercise, or even health, really are maybe not digging deep enough into the history and the tradition of yoga. All of these things that we do, the stretches we're doing, the breathing techniques, meditation, the philosophy in yoga, all of these things serve one purpose, but that purpose is not contorting the body. It's not even, again, like I said, even health from a physical perspective. So in this time of practice, don't worry about going as far as you can. Stay safe. Make sure it feels safe. Make sure you feel a stretch. And then just relax and rest assured you're getting as much benefit as you can for now. Okay, so we'll come up and then we make our way back onto our back to just relax for a few moments. That's called a rebound. All right, we draw our legs in and just give ourselves a little bit of a shakeout, a little bit of movement. Experiment, try some different things out, see how your body responds. And what you're looking for is just to feel more balanced and relaxed when you're done moving. The yin postures tend to create a little bit of a sense of imbalance in the body, a little bit of tension maybe that's left over. So we just counter stretch like this. And then we will use something called the hinge. The hinge can bring us up to seated, and it also helps to stabilize the hips and the spine. And so we take our hands, place them under our hips, palms down. We extend the legs straight up. Now, if there's any pain in your back, you just go ahead and bend the knees till that pain goes away. Otherwise, keep your legs straight, lift your head and neck, take a deep breath. As you exhale, lower the legs toward the ground, and then just before you touch, pause, inhale, pop the legs up, and then let the weight of the legs pull you up to a seat. Now we come into a posture called half butterfly. So we'll have the left leg straight. My right foot comes to the inside of the thigh. And then I would just like to fold forward and down in a relaxed manner. Okay. So actually this is my right leg. Right leg, left foot inside of the thigh. Okay. So coming down, no need to flex or point the foot in any particular direction. Let the back round, and you'll notice my palms are up, my arms are relaxed. So again, a huge temptation is to grab the foot, to use a strap, to try and straighten the spine, pull yourself down. You know, that may be safe for some people, but it's usually unnecessary. And it adds potential risk of injury that, again, I don't really think you're getting much benefit. You see, in yin, we're spending so much time in the postures that you don't need to aggressively stretch like in some other styles of yoga. In a flow class or a vinyasa class or even hatha yoga, you may need to be rather aggressive because you're only going to be there for about 30 seconds. Maybe, if you're lucky, closer to a minute, but that's very, very rare, especially these days. So, if we're going to be in a stretch for 5 minutes, which is what we're doing today, we really don't need to be that aggressive. We can be gentle, and approaching a stretch gently can have a very different effect on the body. So if I spent 5 minutes like this, even if I'm safe, it's going to have a different effect than if I relax into it. So we can do the aggressive stretching in all those other styles of yoga, right? And all those other classes, power yoga, vinyasa yoga, hatha yoga. Let's just let this be the class where we do it a little differently so we get a little bit of a different benefit. Make sure you feel a stretch in the back of your right thigh. Again, feel free to support your left knee, your forearms, your forehead. And if it's helpful, you could sit on something like a block, and that might tilt you forward into the stretch a little more aggressively if that's what you need. Okay, so just gradually coming up with an inhale, you can switch legs. This is called a half butterfly. We're stretching the hamstrings, which are the 4 muscles in the back of the thigh. So again, if we think of today's class as 4 different compartments, so we stretch the inside of the thighs, now we're stretching the back of the thigh. Okay, so again, let's come back and we'll rest for a few moments. The best way to rebound is just to let your body be still and to feel the sensations in the body. Okay, we draw the legs in, we give them a little squeeze. And then we'll go ahead and hinge up. Okay, now we are trying to target the outside of the hips. So again, thinking of our 4 quadrants, we've done the inside, we've done the back, and so now we're moving to the outside of the hips. So this is the gluteal region, glutes, rotators, those muscle groups. And the pose I'm going to recommend today is a square pose. The simplest version of square is just sitting cross-legged. My right foot is in front, so that's what I recommend that you do. That's going to target more of the right hip. And then this is the simplest variation. You just come forward, and what you're looking for is a stretch out here. Now I don't really feel that much of a stretch, so there's a few things I can do. First, I can bring my knees closer, and then now I definitely feel more stretch. Another thing I can do is take the right foot and place it on top of the left knee. Now it's not a lotus, okay, so it's not this. That's a different posture. It's going to have a different effect. Rather, the shins are stacking one above the other. Traditionally, this is called a fire log pose in traditional yoga, Agni Stambhasana. So in yin, we call it a square pose. You're creating this little square shape. And then you come forward, and yes, I definitely feel much more stretch out here. Now, the final thing I'm going to say is for some students. When they come into this shape, they might feel a pinching in the front of their hips. Okay, we want to feel it out here. We don't want to feel it here in the front. So if that's happening, that means you're compressing your joints. And it's not instantly problematic. In other words, you could probably do it today and you'd be fine, even if you felt that pinching the whole time. But long term, it's not a desirable thing. We don't want every time we do this pose to feel this intense pinching in the front of our hips. That's not a stretch. That's called compression, and you're just banging parts of your body together with pressure. Now, compression isn't always bad. Sometimes it can actually be good for you, but in moderation. And in this pose, 5 minutes of that, it's just unnecessary and possibly, again, harmful. So if that's you, you could do this instead, which is a shoelace. All right, and it's still targeting the same area out here. Okay, so coming up on an inhalation, you can switch sides, same thing. Square pose. And once again, you always have the option to support your body, but remember you have too much support when you lose the stretch. The idea of the support is to add a little bit of support, sense of safety, maybe a little bit of comfort. But yin yoga is not just about relaxing and being comfortable. It is a form of exercise, and we know we're getting the exercise when we feel the stretch on the outside of the hip. Okay, so if we don't feel any stretch, we might be really comfortable, but we may not be getting really much benefit other than the benefit of relaxation. But there are many other things that we can do to relax. And while yin yoga tends to be relaxing for people, when they're done with the class, their body feels very relaxed. That is the result of the stretching. So it's the stretching that leads to that deep sense of relaxation, okay? Okay, so we're coming up and then eventually back. Again, try and resist the urge to counter stretch immediately. So you just unwind and relax on your back for a few moments to take in all the different sensations. And then we'll bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze. Shake it out. And then hinge up. Okay, so we have one area left. Do you know which one it is? Have you been keeping track? So the last area is the front of the thigh, the quadricep. So we did adductors, hamstrings, glutes, and quads now. So quads, hip flexors, that area. So what we'll do in this posture is we'll take the right foot, fold it back like so. Now we'd like to do this without hurting our knee or our ankle. So there are a few things to keep in mind. If your foot or your ankle hurt, you can experiment with either putting a little padding underneath it. You can roll up a blanket. So imagine this was like a rolled blanket. You could place it under the ankle so it has a little bit of support. The ankle doesn't need to flex quite as much or point. You can also play around the position of the foot. So some people feel better with the toes out to the side. Some feel better toes pointing back. Okay, if the knee hurts, experiment with changing the angle that the knee is pointing. Also, you can try sitting on something, so you could fold up a blanket or a block, something underneath your hips there. Now, the intention today is to stretch the front of the thighs. So, do I feel a stretch or not? That's the question. I don't. So that means what I would do to increase the stretch is place my hands behind me like so, and I begin lowering back until I begin to feel the stretch, or I begin to feel pain in my knee or my ankle. So I would stop at the point where I started feeling pain, even if I didn't feel a stretch, because safety is more important than getting a stretch. I hope everyone understands that. But let's say that I feel safe, I don't feel stretch. Well, I continue going back, and I can lay back onto my back, the crown of my head, onto a big pillow, whatever you like. If you look carefully, you may see my knee is coming up off the ground a little bit, and that's a really common question for people. Is it okay if my knee comes up? Absolutely. As long as you feel safe and stable, then it's fine. If that feels really dangerous, if it feels unsafe, unstable, then by all means, bring yourself up until you feel that stability and safety return. Very important. Now, what if you're all the way back on your back like I am and you still just don't feel anything at the front of your thigh? Well, the next thing to try would be to use the other leg. Unless you study anatomy, you probably don't recognize or realize that your legs are attached to one another with something called connective tissue. So if I bend this knee, it very often changes how intense the stretch is here. That's why the splits are so hard, right? If I have both legs in front of me and I fold forward, that's one thing. If I have one leg back and one leg forward, it's completely different. And that's because of the way the fascia is being pulled and stretched. So that's essentially what's starting to happen here. I bend this knee, now I'm taking up the slack in the connective tissue. So I might feel a greater stretch. Another option is just to drop the knee out to the left, like so. I could even put this foot on top of this leg and push that knee down, right? So just the weight of the leg is pushing the knee down more. And if I'm really, really bendy, really flexible, I could do something like grabbing the leg and actively pulling it up, straight or bent, either way. So sometimes I end up doing it like this. And you can play around with the position of the knee here. And so my body is not a bad example because some days I feel more tension. I don't have to do these more advanced variations to get a stretch. And so I might do this one. But then maybe if I'm doing a lot of yoga that week, or I'm doing a certain sequence that maybe stretches the quads more, then I might find that I need to be quite aggressive just to feel any kind of stretch. And this is an important lesson that I want my students to learn, that our bodies are fluid. They are not static. They're closer to a stream than they are to a stone. And yet in our minds, we very often think of the body as static. We might think thoughts like, I can do this pose, or I need to do this variation of this pose to feel a stretch. And this can show up a lot in yoga, where sometimes students will say to me when I suggest something, I know my body. And again, this is this idea that my body is always the same and I know how it is. But if we actually pay attention to the body, we'll find that it's always changing. What feels safe, what feels comfortable, how far we need to go, the body is always changing if we're paying attention. So the best way to practice yoga is with a lot of awareness and just feeling what the body is open to doing that day, what it can do safely, how far it needs to be pushed in order to get the beneficial stretch in the pose. And that's again going to be different from day to day. So please be careful coming out of this. You may have to push yourself up. You might have to roll away from the leg. Some people can just release the leg like that. So you may have to come all the way up to transition to the other side. That is fine. Again, you do what you need to do for your body to be safe. This side feels much tighter. So you'll see, at least for now, I'm not bending this knee. I'm just going to stay right here. This feels good. And this maybe also comes to another point that can come up for students, which is, do I need to do the same thing on both sides? Right? Does everything need to be identical? There's no simple answer to that. Depends what your goals are. The fact of the matter is the body is not symmetrical. It just isn't. We might like to believe it is. Some people might be fairly symmetrical. But the fact of the matter is our bones are shaped differently on both sides. We have some organs that are offset. Body's not the same on both sides. And what that results in is us feeling tension in certain parts of the body on certain sides and not in others. And so today for me, my left quad is much tighter than the right one was. And that could be the result of, again, some yoga I was doing. Maybe when I'm teaching yoga, I have to demonstrate something. It could be the result of driving. When we drive, we don't use both of our legs equally. I like to hike. And so maybe if I went on a long hike and I was on the side of a hill and there was an incline, and so I was walking sort of asymmetrically, that can result in tension in one side, not on the other. So if my goal is to release tension from the body, which is a very good idea for you to do on a regular basis, then you might find yourself being more aggressive on one side than the other because that side has more tension. You also might find yourself doing the pose at a slightly different angle on one side versus the other because maybe in one thigh you feel the tension, the sweet spot is in one particular position. But then on the other side, the sweet spot is somewhere else, even though it's the same muscle group. And so I've found, at least in my yin practice, it makes a lot of sense to not approach it with a very rigid, symmetrical, same thing on both sides approach. Now there are others I know who might disagree, who think the symmetry is going to affect the brain and trigger certain things in the brain, and it creates a sense of balance. If that's what you experience and that's what you want to do, then I'm not going to argue with you. I've done practices like that, and my sense is that it's not that impactful. It's not that important. More important in my mind is unwinding these tensions in the body, because in yoga these tensions prevent the free flow of energy, what in yoga is called prana and what in Taoism is called chi. And so it's this chi that actually creates a sense of well-being. When it's flowing freely and when it's balanced, we just feel good in our body. And this is one of the reasons why many people report after doing a yoga class. They just feel a general sense of well-being. They feel a little better than they did before they started the class. All right, everyone, so let's take our time. One of the keys to not having to counter stretch immediately and being able to rebound successfully is taking your time coming out of the poses rather than rushing. So I'm feeling a lot of sensitivity, my left knee, my thigh. And again, I've been doing this long enough that I'm fairly certain my knee is fine, but it does feel sensitive after doing that pose. And I'm just noticing that, I'm feeling that. That may be valuable information for me going forward. Let's draw the legs in. We give ourselves a little bit of a shakeout, moving around a little bit. And then when you're done counter stretching, you unwind onto your back, just in any comfortable position. This is called a pentacle. Any comfortable, relaxed position. And don't be afraid to use props if you have them at home, like something under your knees, roll a blanket under your neck, whatever helps you to relax more deeply and completely. And so you unwind, you close your eyes, and for the next few minutes, you just allow your body to be still.
I recommend setting a timer for 6 minutes, which is 10% of the class today.